There was a bit of drama earlier this year, supposedly between Billie Eilish and Taylor Swift. It didn't really seem to be between the two of them, but between their fan bases. But it now seems to be escalating, with a lot of fans theorizing that they have an issue with each other. The other day, Billie's manager Danny was liking hate tweets about Taylor, accusing her of not letting other artists like Billie and Olivia Rodrigo shine. Billie also made an interview comment about no one wanting to see someone perform for 3 hours, which some have speculated is a diss towards Taylor.
I'm not doing a 3-hour show. That's literally psychotic. Nobody wants that. You guys don't want that. Don't want that. You know what I'm saying? I don't even want that as a fan. My favorite artist in the world. I'm not trying to hear them for 3 hours. You know what I mean? It's far too long.
I don't know if Billie has a personal issue with Taylor. But back in April, Billie did an interview with Billboard criticizing the trend of releasing albums with a ton of variants. She said, "We live in this day and age where, for some reason, it's very important to some artists to make all sorts of different vinyls and packaging, which ups the sales and ups the numbers and gets them more money. It's some of the biggest artists in the world making 40 different vinyl packages that have a different unique thing just to get you to keep buying more. It's irritating to me that we're still at a point where you care that much about your numbers and you care that much about making money." After this quote was publicized, people immediately began drawing the connection to Taylor, which makes sense. She's gained attention for doing this exact thing, releasing a ton of different album variants with a slightly different track list, and has received criticism about it for years. She's been called a capitalist queen by Swifties, in a sort of self-aware way, but she has also gained criticism from the general public and a lot of her own fans, with people saying it comes across as money-hungry and wasteful. The exact points that Billie raises about lack of sustainability and caring too much about numbers are views that have been continually expressed about Taylor over the years, even from Swifties. So people making the connection totally make sense. Billie responded and said, "I wasn't singling anyone out. These are industry-wide systemic issues." And Billie acknowledges that she also releases multiple album variants and centers her issues with this around environmentalism. But the sustainability argument is far from the only issue people have with this. I've seen a lot more criticism towards album variants in the last couple of years than I did before that, and this raises the question, is mounting criticism of album variants coming? There's a variety of things that artists can do which are considered career suicide, like staying silent on major political issues, and I think if people get vocal enough about this, eventually the trend of multiple album variants could also become so controversial that artists avoid it. Since Taylor Swift is culturally the face of this, I want to explore her history of it, why I think it's gotten out of hand, and why the supposed beef between her and Billie has resurfaced in the last few days. Firstly, releasing different album variants obviously isn't new. Pop artists particularly have always released albums, deluxe editions, country-exclusive editions, and so on. But the volume does seem to have increased. Taking Taylor as an example, when you look at the variants of albums like 1989 and Reputation, Taylor only released a few options, mainly just changing the color of the discs. 1989 had a deluxe edition with 3 bonus tracks, and Reputation had no deluxe at all. Fast forward to 2020, that's when things really started to change for Taylor. When she announced her indie folk album Folklore, she revealed that there were 8 different versions of the album with different covers and differently colored vinyls. And there were a few people criticizing this at the time on social media, but generally people didn't have an issue with it. Me personally, I didn't either. I think giving fans an option of cover and color if they want to buy an album physically is cool. And importantly, they all had the same track list. The criticism around Taylor really escalated with her 2022 album Midnights. This album's rollout became known for being confusing, and the amount of album variants gained attention from the general public, and this is where Taylor started to face real backlash. She initially revealed that Midnights would have 4 album variants with the same track list, but different covers and vinyl colors, similar to Folklore. This was relatively non-controversial, except for the fact that the backs of the physical editions have clock numbers, and this was clearly incentivizing fans to buy all 4 album variants, which is the only way to make the clock. Midnights was released under the guise of a simple 13-track album. In fact, Taylor said the album's length was central to the concept, with the album being based on 13 sleepless nights throughout her life. And this led some fans to wonder if Midnights would be another album like Reputation with no deluxe. But the opposite happened. Midnight's released at midnight, and 3 hours later, Taylor announced the surprise 3 a.m. tracks, which were an additional 7 deluxe songs. There was also the Target exclusive version of Midnight's, which contained some extra remixes. Then, Taylor announced Midnight's, the Till Dawn edition, with Hits Different and 2 more remixes. And this itself gained some criticism because Hits Different was initially a Target exclusive song. Nobody really cared about the other remixes on the Target edition, and people who were buying it definitely did so under the impression that it was the only way to physically have Hits Different. And then Taylor released the late night edition of Midnight's. This version included the new track You're Losing Me, which was the first new track she released after the announcement of her breakup with Joe, and based on its title, many fans suspected that this was a response song, so they were obviously scrambling to get it. On top of this, You're Losing Me wasn't available on streaming platforms for a very long time, further incentivizing people to get this new version of Midnight's, many of whom had already bought previous editions of Midnight's without knowing that more were coming. What really rubbed people the wrong way was that the late night edition of Midnight's removed the tracks from the previously released Till Dawn edition and 2 tracks from the 3 a.m. edition. This became so confusing that Swifties had to draw up charts to understand what albums came with what tracks. And as you can see, there was never a complete edition of Midnight's. If you want to own every track in physical form, you're going to have to buy the album multiple times. The criticism against Taylor grew stronger with 1989 Taylor's version. For this album, Taylor released multiple physical variants with different covers and disc colors. This time, the track lists were the same for each version, but the criticism came from the way they were rolled out. Taylor would make one album variant available for purchase for 48 hours. Then it would be completely removed, as she announced another variant which was available for 48 hours, and so on. This left fans annoyed because they couldn't pick their favorite and just buy that one. As far as they know, their favorite might be the first one, so they feel pressured to buy. But a few days later, she could release a different variant that they prefer. Again, even people who love Taylor like myself have to admit that this was clearly done as a way to boost album sales. Not only did the general public not like this, but a lot of Swifties were, in my opinion, rightfully annoyed by it, and thought it wasn't fair to place time limits on fans to buy something when they don't have full information about their options. And I don't think Tortured Poets was as bad, but it did still gain criticism. Taylor announced the original album and then 4 deluxe versions, each with a different bonus track. This kind of practice was kind of what Billie was talking about. Fans obviously don't know which of these 4 tracks they're gonna like the most, which increases incentives to buy more than one copy. And then 2 hours after Tortured Poets released, Taylor announced the Anthology, a 15-track second album which included the 4 deluxe songs. The idea of the anthology was smart. In case the main album leaked, which it did, Taylor had a whole second album which doesn't have physical copies, and therefore was almost guaranteed not to leak. Most Swifties speculate that physical versions of the anthology are being made now, and I would be surprised if they're not. And if Taylor does release a physical version of the anthology, this would be another album variant. And although no one forced them to do this, there are fans who bought multiple of the original variants to get the deluxe tracks, which would now be redundant if they buy the anthology, which they probably will if they want the other songs on them. This leaves fans who want to own every song in physical form, likely buying this album around 5 times. And obviously, I'm mainly focusing on physical versions, but there's also an issue with different digital editions. Billie spoke about the environmental impact of different physical versions, but also the obsession with charts and sales which relates to physical and digital. And that brings us up to right now. On Friday the 17th, Taylor released 3 new digital versions of Tortured Poets, each with a voice memo of her first draft of a song. And then on the 23rd, she released another 3 digital versions of Tortured Poets, this time with a live version of a different song each. In terms of the voice memos, she did this back in the day with 1989. But the difference then was that all 3 voice memos were together on the deluxe. I don't think there's much justification for Taylor making 3 separate editions for these voice memos, so you have to buy 3 times to get them all. I don't think Taylor is doing it strictly for the money. There are much easier ways for her to make money. I actually think it's more likely to be her wanting to maintain her place in the charts. One of Taylor's biggest weaknesses is that she clearly does place a lot of value and self-worth on accolades, achievements, and awards, including charts. But another aspect to this is that because these new variants released as Billie released her new album, fans have accused Taylor of chart manipulation and trying to keep herself at the top, leading to Billie's manager essentially accusing Taylor of failing to support other artists by blocking them in the charts. In my opinion, this isn't personal. I don't think Taylor is some comic book villain trying to bring Billie down because she might have criticized her. But I do think Taylor is trying to keep her album at the top of the charts, which by proxy is negatively impacting Billie. I think undoubtedly, the trend of a ton of album variants for purposes of bumping sales, increasing profit, or boosting chart positions is widespread. Taylor is far from the only artist doing this, and Billie is correct in calling it an industry-wide phenomenon. I think the question is whether it's an issue. Obviously, Billie raised the environmental concerns with overconsumption and overproduction. Others complain about being greedy and looking desperate, but that is met with mixed feedback. Many feel that if artists want to make a ton of money and fans are willing to buy, and no one is forcing them to, it's all good. My personal issue with it is when it does negatively affect fans, or when fans are being somehow coerced to consume more than they normally would. When Cowboy Carter vinyls shipped in April, fans were surprised that 5 songs were missing, because they were produced before last-minute changes to the album. I don't think this is acceptable because fans didn't know that they weren't getting all tracks when they bought the physical copies. And honestly, I think this is legally questionable. On a moral level, I also have an issue with what Taylor does, in terms of selling album variants knowing there are new versions coming that fans don't know about. Fans buy up albums because Taylor has such insane demand that they won't last long. Taylor's website will impose time limits to get certain items, and this I think does lead fans to buy more than they normally would, because they don't know what else Taylor is going to be releasing. This could very easily be avoided by Taylor releasing all of her music per album on streaming and then a complete physical version, or at least a standard and deluxe, rather than tons of different versions. As I said, I think different versions for different colored discs or different covers is cool. But I don't like Taylor or any artist putting different songs on different versions, so fans have to buy the album tons of times to get them all. I think with a lot of the backlash rising against celebrities for being out of touch with the financial difficulties of normal people, there is a good chance that these kinds of practices will become more widely criticized by people other than Billie Eilish. As far as I'm concerned, the line is when it doesn't benefit the fans. I don't like some of the general public's takes on Taylor releasing too much music. I think that's really dumb. Firstly, it's her job, and she shouldn't hold herself back for the sake of letting other artists compete. But also, it's a mutually beneficial thing between Taylor and the fans. Taylor gets success, fans get new music. But with some of these album variants, it's only beneficial one way. You can't possibly argue that having deluxe songs separated onto different albums is in any way beneficial to fans, compared to one deluxe version with all deluxe songs on it. That is clearly only done for the benefit of the artist, and I think it should stop. Again, Taylor is far from the only person doing this. I'm just using her as an example because people are talking about her doing it. But most popular artists, including Billie, are all guilty of this. And I think most fans are sick of it. I'm already seeing people start to boycott buying albums because the practice of adding new songs later is so common, and I don't blame them. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you next time.